One topic, two opinions.
If Germany didn't have immigrants, we'd still be eating nothing but potatoes and cabbage.
There will always be rich and poor, but you don't accept that reality.
I want to change that.
The Moodring changes color to red when our guests agree, blue when they don't.
I'm Maura and I'm an activist in the organization Seebrücke. I'm fighting for migration routes to Germany and against Europe closing its doors to the rest of the world. We have space for people and we should make it possible.
I'm Salahdin and I head Berlin's CDU youth wing. I believe that Germany shouldn't take in everyone who wants to come here. And we can't. I come from an immigrant family and that's part of my daily reality. That's also why the issue is important to me.
Will they come closer? Or will the mood get chillier? We need to limit migration.
I agree.
I don't. When we talk about migration, we need to see what limiting migration actually means. Europe's policy of sealing its borders has, in recent years, led to 10,000 people drowning in the Mediterranean on the way to Europe, to thousands of people languishing in camps on Greek islands, to people being locked up in Libyan camps, and even to some being enslaved and tortured there.
We need to place limits on migration because we don't have room for everyone. It's not a good idea to remove people from everything they know, hand them over to human traffickers and make them start over at zero. Starting over is very hard, and it's really only the next generation who benefits. And in the end, unlimited migration isn't workable. That's reality and we have to face that.
I would absolutely disagree. That line of argument is intended to evoke a kind of nightmare scenario of people flooding into Europe. But, in fact, the number of people applying for asylum in Germany over the past 10 years has been stable. The average is largely unchanged in recent years. What's more, it's mainly the global south that's taking in refugees. In 2021, 1.3 million came to Germany. At the same time, and we tend to forget this, 1 million left Germany. So net migration was 300,000 people. For a country that's as rich and populous as Germany, we have to say that's nothing.
Migration enables cultural exchange.
I agree.
Yes, definitely.
My grandparents came to Germany under what was called the guest worker agreement, and that's helped define me. German isn't my native language. I have a different perspective on many social issues. In that sense, I'm not part of Germany's mainstream, even though I do think it offers me opportunities. It's an interesting form of dialogue and it gives me a unique perspective.
Well, maybe it's not all that unique, and I mean that in a good way. We're a big part of this society. If Germany didn't have immigrants, we'd still be eating nothing but potatoes and cabbage. And even beyond that culinary diversity, as someone who's half Peruvian, I'd like to note that even potatoes, which we tend to think of as quintessentially German, came from Peru. Just about everything that shapes our daily lives, and not just our food, is the fruit of cultural and social exchange.
I'd say my own relationship to Turkey is a fair bit stronger than it is in the fourth generation. They don't feel that connection as strongly, and that's normal. Turkish is a good language to know here in Berlin. The Döner kebab is a great example. It was invented in Berlin. You could call it a German invention by way of Turkish immigrants. But it's not seen as German, even though it was invented in Germany, in fact in Berlin.
Now we've drifted away from EU policies to very concrete things like doner kebabs and potatoes. But it's an excellent analogy. What is Germany today, anyhow? A doner kebab couldn't have been invented in any other country. And that's what migration means to me.
The EU has double standards regarding refugees.
I'd say the preconditions are different.
I agree, and I do believe it's a double standard.
Germany does struggle with migration and refugees, particularly when they come from the Middle East. Their cultural background is different, and many people here feel more of a sense of connection to Ukraine than the Middle East. That's how certain groups see it.
So wird das wahrgenommen von gewissen Gruppen.
Ukrainians have received far more help than other refugees. It's great that Ukrainians have been so warmly welcomed. But the EU has shown that when there's a political will, there's a way. So I feel a lot of frustration, hurt and disappointment. Why couldn't other refugees have been helped this quickly and easily? And yes, it is a double standard that people who are seen as European, white, Christian are apparently more welcome here in Europe than others.
The solidarity Ukraine is seeing from around the world is due to the Russian invasion, the war. That sets it apart from Syria. Many people, especially in Europe, knew nothing about the war in Syria. That war started in 2011, and until 2015 they didn't care. It was irrelevant. But for many people, the Ukraine war is different.
What I think is worth noting is that this warm reception, this culture of welcome, and the immense solidarity shown towards Ukrainian refugees, we did experience a similar wave of solidarity in 2015, when many refugees, mainly Syrian refugees, arrived here. Hundreds of German cities, more than 300 at last count, all over the country, stepped up to accommodate more refugees.
Die sich dafür einsetzen, dass mehr Geflüchtete bei sich vor Ort aufgenommen werden.
That was an honorable thing to do, of course. But the reality is that since 2015, the far-right AfD has been voted into 14 state parliaments. A group of people who oppose all of it. That's new and it's also part of the story.
Und das ist ein riesengroßes Problem, dass wir die AfD haben.
Yes, and the AfD is a huge problem. The conclusion I draw is that we can't allow the topic of migration policy to be dominated by the AfD and their positions. We need to reclaim that discourse and open up a fresh perspective.
Refugee and migration routes should be legalized.
I agree that war refugees need legal channels for asylum.
I definitely agree with the statement.
People who want to flee a war-torn region should be able to go to neighboring countries and have legal ways to come here. Avoid those illegal networks, come here legally, and embassy could help with that.
I absolutely agree. That means, for example, that people need ways in their country of origin or near their point of exit to apply for humanitarian visas or apply for asylum through an embassy. And that means, ultimately, being allowed to board a flight to leave.
Tatsächlich ist es ganz konkret, im Endeffekt ausgeflogen zu werden.
The average age in the EU is 45. We have a shortage of skilled labor, especially in Germany. And we have a legal framework. We should be handling this through the embassies, so that people who want to come here legally and who meet certain standards and criteria have a way to do that.
I believe we shouldn't draw such a clear line between refugees and other kinds of migrants. You need to keep in mind what motivates people to leave their home countries. The routes that people are taking now to travel to Europe are so dangerous that no one would do that if they had any other choice. These people don't see any chance for a dignified life in their own country. We need to create legal and safe migration routes for those people.
I would stick to war refugees. There will always be countries that have a different standard of living than we do, and helping individual people does nothing to change that. I'm pretty sure of that. We might be helping one individual, but we're not doing anything to help the situation where they come from. There will always be rich and poor, but you don't accept that reality.
I want to change that.
You reject that. You want equality, and that's not realistic.
I also reject that.
Das, glaube ich, ist einfach unrealistisch.
Too bad.
All EU countries should accept equal numbers of refugees.
I disagree.
Es kommt drauf an.
It depends, but on the whole, I agree.
Ich glaube, in jedem
I definitely believe we need to distribute refugees in Europe more equitably and show more solidarity. Our current migration regime is largely shaped by the Dublin regulation. And that means that it's mainly countries near the EU's external borders that are shouldering the larger share of the work when it comes to taking in the refugees. That fact in itself is a violation of solidarity.
Natürlich im Kern ein absolut unsolidarisches Prinzip.
Man kann auch
You can't force that on countries that refuse to take in migrants or that have different immigration policies.
kann man nicht aufzwingen.
The European Union isn't unified on this question, and you have to respect what other countries want. Dublin isn't being implemented at the moment.
Wir bräuchten eine neue Regelung.
We need a new policy, so there we agree. It's not fair.
The Dublin regulation is law here in the European Union. It's never been revised. It's still the principle governing the distribution of refugees in Europe. But my larger point is that we have universal international human rights standards. Migration is a human right, and Europe has to uphold that.
Dem würde ich so nicht zustimmen. Nein.
I see things differently. In the European Union, when countries refuse or don't want this, and I wouldn't automatically say they're all right-wing, it's their population who doesn't agree with this immigration policy that you're suggesting or advocating. If that's the will of their population, then we have to respect that.
So what's the conclusion? Did our guests grow any closer?
Ich glaube, es gab verschiedene Punkte.
I do think we agreed on various points. For example, that migration is a hugely important and vibrant part of German society.
Und nichtsdestotrotz sind wir uns
But we still don't agree on whether the solution is to promote more migration or to continue putting up walls and barriers.
oder eben weiter auf Abschottung zu setzen.
Natürlich, wir haben
We do, of course, hold very different positions, and in their substance, they can't be reconciled.
nicht überbrückt.
But we had a genuine conversation, and I'll take that with me, even though I'm already familiar with the arguments themselves.
Auch nichts Überraschendes dabei, muss ich ehrlich sagen.
Nichtsdestotrotz finde ich,
Even so, I believe that people who share this family history of migration should work together to advocate for a politics of solidarity and anti-racist policies.
Stelle einsetzen sollten. In dem
And what I take from this conversation is that I'd like to keep working with people who are fighting for a migration policy based on solidarity.
solidarische Migrationspolitik einsetzen.
Ich glaube, das
I believe she truly wants to help people, and that's what she's doing.
tut sie auch.